Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Doyle. This is the Verdigris Table, and I am here to tell you that you can be a dungeon master and run your own game of Dungeons and Dragons. Even if you have never done it before, even if you have never played before. If you want to get into D&D, but you don't know of a game that you can join, you can start your own and lead your friends on an incredible adventure. Now, if you've been playing for a while and you're thinking about taking your first foray into running the game, maybe you want to see the table from behind the Dungeon Master screen, or you've got a cool idea for an adventure, awesome, great. This is for you as well, but I promise you don't need any experience playing Dungeons and Dragons to be a dungeon master. The first time I played Dungeons and Dragons, I was the DM and it was great. We had a ton of fun, and it's not because I am some special make. You can do it too. Now, if you want to, but it all sounds a little big and scary, I'm going to drop a link here that might address some of your concerns, because this is absolutely worth doing, worth trying, even if you're afraid, especially if you are afraid. In this video here, I'm going to lay out the 3 things the Dungeon Master is doing at the table. I'm going to give you some keys to success, set you up on your way to running your own Dungeons and Dragons campaign. This is actually the start of a series aimed at getting you to begin your Dungeon Master journey. Being a DM is more work than being a player, but what they don't always tell you is that work can be a lot of fun. A Dungeon Master gets to play way more D&D than their players, and are seeing way more of the game, of the story. On deck, I am going to help you do that work and prepare an adventure. I'm going to walk you through the Lost Mines of Phandelver, maybe the most popular adventure of all time at this point, and an excellent place to begin. Once that's complete, I'm going to show you how I'm using Lost Mines of Phandelver from the starter set and combining it with a few other things to create a massive, dynamic, open world sandbox for my own personal home game. I am very excited about all of that. But first, let's talk about the 3 main roles of a Dungeon Master. The DM can often be the game recruiter and the schedule coordinator and the party host, even the mediator sometimes. We wear a lot of hats. And I'm going to tell you, don't be afraid to ask for help and to delegate. Also, don't be surprised when a lot of it lands on you anyway, because we are occupying a leadership role here, and oftentimes we just simply want it more. Still, it's okay to ask the rest of the table for help, especially with those real-world concerns. But during the game, the DM is responsible for fulfilling 3 main roles. We're the referee, the narrator, and the world. As referee, the Dungeon Master is the interpreter of the rules. When the player decides that their character does a thing, the DM decides if there is a check, what modifiers get added to the roll, and how difficult that thing is to accomplish. Most of the time, it's that simple, that's it. As player characters and enemies gain more abilities, things can get more complex, but here's the good news. You get to level up as a Dungeon Master as the game is progressing, just like everything else. You don't need to figure out how 2 6th level spells are going to interact right now, because we're starting at level 1. You don't need to know the finer points of like Smite or like Sneak Attack if you don't have a Paladin or a Rogue in the party. You definitely want a solid grasp of the general rules to get started, and my D&D 101 series is a great way to hit the ground running, but I'm also going to include down below in the description the starter set rules, which is 32 pages, and the essential kit rules as well, which is twice as long but has like character creation stuff, and the last few pages of that are going to give you the sidekick rules, which will allow you to run this game for 1 other person or 2 other players. For the overachievers out there, the basic rules are going to be down in the description as well, but I suggest keep it simple to get started. Do your best to learn everything, but keep in mind, nobody knows all the rules. People have been playing this game for decades, don't know all the rules. No one expects you to know everything, especially as you're just starting out. Rulings, not rules, is a catchy phrase, maybe controversial, but catchy, that will take you a long way in running a fun game. There are a ton of rules in D&D, and there are plenty of scenarios, edge cases, where it isn't exactly clear how those rules are supposed to be applied. So it's okay for the DM to use their best judgment, make a call, keep things moving. The best thing you can do when the game is like getting bogged down is to make a ruling and continue the action. You can always say something like, this is how it's going to be right now, and we'll figure out the official rules later, and next session, that's the way we'll do things. And you might even find out like the ruling you made at the moment is better, is for you guys at least, than the raw rules as written version. That's how a lot of homebrew gets started. Keep in mind, it is also okay to look stuff up sometimes. If it is something especially that like the player character is going to be doing, an ability, a spell, it is worth taking that extra minute to figure it out the right way at the table. Even Matt Mercer looks stuff up. He does it almost every night. You can do it at home. It's cool. It's all right. Again, you don't have to know everything or pretend to know everything. Also, the DM doesn't have to be the only one looking stuff up. The players should especially be invested in knowing how their characters' things work. It can be a conversation at the table, but ultimately, yes, the dungeon master is the referee who makes that final call. Do your best to be fair and consistent, and if you get it wrong, don't be afraid to fix it next time. There is some overlap, of course, but if being the referee is like the science side of being a DM, the art side is fulfilling the role of the narrator. Before the player can do anything, the dungeon master describes what it is in front of them, and the players decide how to interact with that. The DM puts on their referee hat to do the game mechanics side of the equation, and then whoop, back to narrator as the dungeon master describes the results. My best advice to being a good narrator is to read a lot. It's going to help your vocabulary, and it's going to give you tons of inspiration. Also, movies, TV shows, video games, any media that is remotely close to fantasy, action, adventure is great, but almost anything is good. Anything's going to help. There's definitely a video idea on my list for, recommended viewing and reading, and the DMG actually has a list in the back. I'd also love to hear comments, honestly. Down below in the comments, what's your best D&D inspiration? Now, don't be afraid of lifting tropes and cliches. They get repeated for a reason. They work, and they're instantly recognizable, so your players are going to easily grasp what's going on. Originality is all well and good, but you can definitely overdo that and lose people. Another easy way to improve your narration is to engage all of the senses. We often default to the visual, but we have 5 senses, and we should use all of them in our descriptions. I try not to overdo it, but sometimes I actually even include the 6th sense. You don't want to tell your players how their character feels about a thing, reacts to it. That's like their domain, but I will absolutely tell them when they get a feeling about something, catch a vibe from a location or whatever, because that is sensory input. That actually rubs against another classic, the old show, don't tell. Honestly, most advice for writers is great advice for dungeon masters. But perhaps the most important thing I'm going to tell you about being a narrator, being a dungeon master in this whole video, it's vitally important that you understand being a dungeon master is not being a writer. It's not writing a story. It is very much going to feel like it is, that you are writing a story, and many a dungeon master, new or otherwise, have fallen into that trap, but the story happens at the table in the game, not in the preparation. When you write a story, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that applies to adventure design too. Campaigns, sure, but listen, these are not stories exactly. The Dungeon Master provides a bunch of beginnings. An adventure is really just a series of beginnings, and the middle, the story part, is what happens when we play the game. The players are going to do things that you could never have anticipated. They're going to think of crazy ways, cool ways to solve problems, and they're going to pull this story in ways that you did not expect while you were preparing it, and that is awesome. That is what D&D is all about. That's what makes it a game for the players and the DM. Makes it special and unlike anything else. If you know the middle, if you decide there's one way for the players to do this thing, then you have taken away their agency, and they're going to feel it. They're going to feel railroaded. The same goes for endings. Sure, you can know the next new beginning that happens in the room when they walk through the door or whatever, but how any given encounter ends should be up to the players' decisions and the dice. If you know how it ends, it's not a game anymore, really. You might know like a few ways it might go down, so you're prepared for them, but don't become stuck on one particular ending. We don't figure out how an encounter ends during our prep. We watch it play out at the table. It's fun. Lean into that. It also can help to remind yourself that the player characters are the protagonists of this story. They are the heroes, and what they do has to matter. What they do in the middle determines the end. Encounter by encounter, adventure by adventure. One of the best approaches to being a DM is to create beginnings, to create scenarios that give the PCs chances to make decisions and be awesome. And the main way that we're going to do that is by being the world. Everyone else at the table is controlling a single character, but the Dungeon Master is controlling everything else. Every non-player character, every monstrous bad guy, the physical layout of the environment, even the weather is in the Dungeon Master's controls. The players are going to be the heroes of this story, but the Dungeon Master is the world. I believe one of the primary goals of a good DM is to provide a consistent and believable world. However fantastical, however magical things might be. A good DM gives the players a world that they can lose themselves in. It is a wonderful gift to give your friends. Having a good command of the rules and being good at the narrator descriptive part can go a long way, but the best advice I can give to new Dungeon Masters on how to present a believable world comes down to two things. Play the monsters and NPCs as if they were real, and have the world responding to the players. A huge part of being a DM is running the monsters, so spend time in prep learning what they can do and thinking about how they might act based on what they want. A beast is going to have different goals and tendencies than a demon. An orc is going to behave very differently than a dragon. The bad guys don't want to just stand around and get killed by some band of adventurers. They want to win that fight and live. They want to succeed in their goals. That does not mean the Dungeon Master is playing against the players, and it's definitely going to feel that way sometimes, especially to new players. So it's great to get out in front of that and remind everybody, even ourselves, that the Dungeon Master is not the antagonist. The DM definitely wants to challenge the players, certainly, but we want the PCs to survive so the players can experience all the other cool stuff that we spent all that time preparing. The Dungeon Master doesn't want to kill the PCs, but the monsters might. You can play a little suboptimally sometimes, pull punches, fudge rolls to a degree, but if the players feel like the monsters are not playing to win, it sucks all the tension and a lot of the fun out of the game, and it takes away from the believability of your world. The stakes are usually not quite as high when you're running an NPC, but the same things apply. The other characters in your world are not, walking in prescribed loops with a few canned responses on a dialogue tree. The more you can do to make them feel real, the more real your world is going to be. It does not take much. You don't need an elaborate backstory. You don't need to be a voice actor. Just a descriptive detail or a mannerism and some sort of motivation, a secret, a goal. It can be simple, like run this shop to make a profit and feed my family, but give those NPCs a third dimension. The other part is a little more advanced, but doesn't come up until the campaign has been going for a bit, so you should be ready to pull this off when the time comes. Have the world respond to the player character's actions. Again, the Dungeon Master's character is the world, and acting is reacting. If you want to make the world feel real and have the players feel important, have the world responding, reacting to their actions. This is the good stuff for me. When I say the Dungeon Master gets to play more D&D outside of the session, this is a big part of what I'm talking about. What is the world doing because of what the players did? If the party kills a bunch of bandits on the road, maybe word gets out and they gain a reputation. It could be that the mayor in that next town over gives them a reward or has a different new quest for them, or wants to deputize them with whatever responsibilities and benefits that all might entail. Maybe the bandit king hears about it, and now the next time the party's on this particular stretch of road, there are bigger, better, badder bandits out there looking for them. Maybe, the next time they come to town, it has grown because trade is prospering, because travel has been made safer, and now there's magic items for sale here where there only used to be basic gear. A dynamic, responsive world is going to feel more real and show the players that what their characters do actually matters. Now you can probably see there's a lot of overlap in these three roles for sure, but you can excel at all of them. Sure, you might be more naturally inclined, better at certain aspects of it, and other sides of it you might have to put in a little more work and practice, but you can do this. You can get the rules down, you can narrate the story, and you can create a living, breathing world. You can bring a lot of joy to your players, make some awesome memories around the table, and just all in all have a great time in the process. I promise you, you can be a Dungeon Master, and the starter set is a great way to begin your D&D career, your Dungeon Master career. Plus, it's super affordable. I'm going to put a link down below in the description if you want to pick up a copy of that in a way that helps me. Awesome, thanks. In the next videos, I'm going to show you how to run the adventure in that box. That's why I got a new copy of it. I'm going to show you how to get prepared to run that adventure, The Lost Mines of Phandelver, piece by piece. Click right here and join me in Phandalin, where we're going to have a great time and share the joy of D&D. I will see you there. Thank you so much for watching. Get out there, have fun, be kind, and I'll see you next time.